The Promise is a big, small book. It spans only 250 odd pages, but manages to cover the passing of nearly 40 years. I had high hopes for really enjoying this 2021 Booker Prize winner, arguably one of the top 2 or 3 most prestigious awards a novel can win. It did not disappoint. The novel's main protagonists are members of the Afrikaner Swart family, husband Manny, his wife Rachel, and their children, Anton, Astrid, and Armor, who live in Pretoria, South Africa. At its core, the book is a family saga, each section of the novel a decade, which distills down to a singular event, the family coming together for a funeral. The book hinges on the title's promise that upon Rachel's death in 86, she wished the family's black domestic servant Salome be given ownership of the family's house and land. The pledge is overheard by Armor, the youngest child, and is not fulfilled. This fuels much of the discontent and unease of the next 200 pages. Fast forward another decade, and the 3 children are reunited at home to mourn the passing of their father, who perishes after a fatal snake bite. Ironically, much of the family's money stems from proceeds from the reptile park he co-owns and manages, and where he ultimately gets bitten. After this funeral, Anton, having deserted the army and spending 10 years as a transient deserter, receives the house per Manny's will and assures an older Armor that he will follow through on the promise. He does not. Another decade passes and relations between the children further disintegrate. They largely avoid each other, and Astrid and Anton continue spurning their younger sister's appeals to honor their mother's promise. Salome remains living in the house, but still as a live-in maid and not the sole proprietor. In 2004, we find Anton in a terrible marriage with Desiree, his childhood sweetheart. Anton has done a poor job of managing the estate and finds himself in great debt. Astrid, also struggling in her marriage, has begun an affair with her husband's business partner. Amor is working in an HIV ward whilst living with her long-term girlfriend. Not shockingly, the promise has still not been honored. In an act of senseless and wanton violence, after going to a shopping mall after a failed penance service, Astrid is killed in a seemingly random carjacking. As Anton and Armor come together once again for a funeral, a final appeal to give Salome the house from Armor is rebuffed. The matter unresolved, she leaves once again. The last section of the book begins in 2018 with Anton feeling like he has wasted his life in a deep and unmoving depression fueled by alcohol. One night, after a particularly emotive fight with his wife, Anton commits suicide. Armor, the only surviving member of her family at this point, legally transfers the home to Salome. The promise is fulfilled. Any book that deals with multiple funerals, depression, and suicide is going to be an emotional read, and at times the promise is a bit of a slog. Grim and unrepentant, the Swart family is deeply problematic. Although they are written lovingly by Galugt, they themselves show us, the reader, much coldness. Even the lush tropical South African backdrop is at times written as if it's a joyless, dry wasteland. Indeed, for our characters, it is. No South African book written in the 21st century truly escapes the historical legacy of apartheid, and in fact, The Promise discusses openly the progress of a Mandela-led South Africa, but leans into the fact that many societal problems still run deep. There are numerous mentions of rampant racism, classism, and bigotry, and the fact that a Black maid for much of the book cannot even legally own property is hugely relevant. From a literary perspective, it's hard to find issues with the Booker Prize winning material, and Galugt's prose is sharp and lyrical, descriptive yet forceful and highly emotive. Akin to many contemporary modern authors, Galugt squeezes between first and third person narration and utilizes stream of consciousness in some sections to great effect, getting into the minds of our central characters. Although you may be hard pressed to smile while reading The Promise, it's a notable book. And you'll be thinking for some time about how the family's historical arc could have been so drastically different if better decisions would have been made along the way.